Speaker, he talks about driving investment out of Canada. He must be remembering his own time as minister, because since 2016, Mr. Speaker, foreign direct investment is up 60% in this country. Last year, we were third in the world after the U.S. and Brazil, which makes us #1 for foreign investment in the G20 per capita. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, we are continuing to show the world that they can have confidence in Canada and in Canadians. Why doesn't he have confidence in Canadians? Why won't he invest in Canada?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Deputy Governor of the Bank of Canada said of Canada's investment problems, emergency break glass. Canadian workers get 55 cents of investment for every dollar American workers get, and only 65 cents for every dollar that an OECD worker gets. The gap between the Canadian and U.S. economy is now at a 100-year high after 9 years of the NDP Liberals. So one last time. His own documents show that his 61 cent a litre carbon tax will blow a $40 billion hole in our economy. If that number's not right, what is the real number?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again we see that the Leader of the Opposition is frustrated that international economists, climate experts, academics all back our plan to both fight climate change and grow a strong economy, while he's stuck with late-night far-right conspiracy YouTube videos. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, we are delivering concretely to build a stronger future for Canadians, to fight climate change and to grow the economy, while he is hiding his head in the sand and refusing to admit even that climate change is real.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. A unanimous motion by the Quebec Assembly that education comes under Quebec's exclusive jurisdiction and hiring professors should be based on merit and certainly not based on religion. They reiterate that hiring based on religion is not only discriminatory, but it goes against state secularism. And the National Assembly repeats its request to have the Special Envoy on Islamophobia fired. I'd just like to remind all members, I know there was a lot of content in that question, and it's difficult for our interpreters to interpret all of that. And so we should speak at a speed that's reasonable for our interpreters. Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, let me be crystal clear. The universities have to hire the best possible people for the job. That's their job. But we also recognize that universities have policies that they've put in place to ensure that their staff reflect the diversity of the communities they serve. So I have full confidence in our universities, and we must always keep fighting systemic discrimination in all our institutions from coast to coast to coast. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Does it take 9 years to learn not to answer questions? The National Assembly of Quebec unanimously said that your person has insulted all of us. We're calling for her resignation. Are you on Ms. Gawabi's position against Quebec? Are you on her side and against the National Assembly of Quebec with all its elected representatives? If not, let it be known.
Le Très Honorable Premier Ministre.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. To suggest in this place that a member from Quebec elected by Quebecers does not represent his constituents is an insult to this very place, and the Bloc, which was elected to this place, should be ashamed of saying such a thing. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
2000 to 2014, Canadians attracted $30 to $100 billion more of American investment than the reverse. In the last 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, there have been $450 billion more Canadian dollars invested in the U.S. than the return. That's Canadian money billing U.S. pipelines, U.S. mines, U.S. businesses paying American workers with Canadian money. That is the consequence of a high carbon tax and a high energy price that drives jobs away. When will the Prime Minister learn that his radical plan to hike the tax to 61 cents a litre will destroy our economy further?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The problem with that argument, Mr. Speaker, is that the Leader of the Opposition doesn't understand that the International Monetary Fund and others have projected Canada to have stronger growth than the United States next year, despite the fact that we have a price on pollution, but perhaps because of the fact we have a price on pollution that is drawing in investment from around the world in the growing sectors of the economy to ensure good jobs in mining, in environmental research, in various industries, because we know the future is greener.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Our per capita GDP is smaller than it was 10 years ago, perhaps the first time since the Great Depression that has happened. He's had the worst economic growth since the Depression. The OECD says that Canada will have the worst economic growth this year and for the next 3 decades. Our economy has dropped more per capita since before COVID than any other G7 country. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. This Prime Minister wants to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre, which will be an economic catastrophe for this country.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what that little performance just showed is that the Leader of the Opposition is using his brokenest argument around Canada to explain why he would cut dental programs, cut child care, step away from any climate action, withdraw support to draw in investment. That's his excuse. The problem with that argument, however, Mr. Speaker, is Canada actually has the strongest fiscal position of any of the world's advanced economies, and our choice is putting that strong fiscal position in service of investment in Canadians, in dental, in childcare, in pharma, in...
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
There he goes again, telling Canadians they've never had it so good. It's never been so good for those 2 million people lined up at food banks. For the 1 million people every month that go to food banks in Ontario, record-smashing increases in homelessness by his own admission, after he promised a food program that hasn't delivered a single meal, despite millions spent on bureaucracy. 1 in 4 kids line up at food banks. And now, the worst. He proposes to quadruple the carbon taxes on heat, housing, fuel, and food. How much, and how much will that take from our GDP?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the problem that he will not the problem he has is that he cannot admit that the price on pollution puts more money back in the pockets of middle-class Canadians and those working hard to join it. He continues to spew the line that Canada is broken, and whenever I point out that we have a strong fiscal balance sheet that we should be putting in service of programs and supports for Canadians, he says, no, we need cuts. That is not the path forward for Canada, and that's the choice Canadians get to make. Do we go with austerity and cuts to programs, or do we invest in Canadians and their future?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Canadians who can't eat, heat, or house themselves are living in austerity now. And as to his false PMO talking point about 8 out of 10 Canadians being better off, it conveniently excludes the $25 billion per year in economic costs that his own government admits that the carbon tax imposes on Canadians. And that's why 6 in 10 Canadian families and 100% of the middle class are worse off with his carbon tax. So his documents show Canadians are worse off. If he doesn't have confidence in his own government documents, how can this House have confidence in his government?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Millions of Canadians across the country have received the Canada carbon rebate checks that puts more money in their pockets every 3 months than it costs them on average on the price on pollution. That allows us not only to fight climate change and boost our economy in strong ways that create the innovative solutions that the world is going to increasingly rely on, but it helps Canadians with affordability at a challenging time. He would eliminate those Canada carbon rebate checks and put forward no plan to fight climate change. That's not how you build the future for Canada.
The Honourable Member from Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, under the Liberals, housing prices in Winnipeg are out of control. The average rent for a one-bedroom suite in Winnipeg increased over 22% since last year, the largest jump in the country. Corporate landlords are buying up affordable housing and jacking up rents because they know they have support of both the Liberals and the Conservatives. Well, I can tell you one thing, Mr. Speaker, they are not the answer to our housing crisis. So my question to the Prime Minister, why is he allowing corporate landlords to price people out of their homes?
Hear, hear, hear. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I very much look forward to working with the NDP Premier of Manitoba on Renters' Bill of Rights. We just presented a number of measures that will directly help renters, like ensuring that rent is counted towards calculation of credit scores so people can get a mortgage, by protecting renters from landlords. We recognize, as I'm sure do the NDP, that that is largely a provincial jurisdiction, but I'm very glad to hear that the Premier of NDP, the NDP Premier of Manitoba will be stepping up to work with the federal government on delivering for Canadians in Manitoba and indeed right across the country.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton-Griesbach.
What is in provincial jurisdiction is what's happening in Edmonton-Griesbach, where the federal government is set to bulldoze hundreds of homes in my community so that developers get rich. These homes are on public land and are some of the last affordable units in my city due to decades of Liberal and Conservative cuts. Families like Kim's, a single mom raising a child with a family with a member of with a disability, is scared she will be homeless. Will the Prime Minister stop the dem evictions, stop selling off land to rich developers, and build the homes that people can actually afford?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our government put forward one of the most ambitious investments in housing that this country has ever seen. We are happy to work hand in hand with the NDP to make sure that public lands get used for affordable housing, that we're doing everything we can to push back against provinces that are attacking public affordability of homes. We would very much like to continue working with the NDP on this matter. They're choosing to play politics with the Conservatives and put politics first. We're going to continue to work to make sure that his residents in Edmonton-Griesbach and indeed right across the country get better affordability, better homes, because that's what this federal government is focused on, not politics.
So, folks, do you think Pierre is right in terms of the data itself? I mean, it's very hard to justify both sides of the story here. I mean, Pierre, I really like the fact that Pierre comes in with hard facts, and Justin is always playing defense here, but maybe that's just how Parliament's set up. The ruling government has to answer all the questions, right? So you have the Conservative Party coming in with lots of tough questions, and the Liberals always has to play defense on them in terms of justifying what they're doing. So probably that's the norm here. So let me know what your thoughts are in terms of that. Now, one of the topics that were brought up was the housing crisis that we're facing currently. I mean, I live in Edmonton, and Edmonton, I don't believe we have such a big issue at the moment. We can still find houses within the 400 to 500 range, but I'm pretty sure in other parts of Canada, such as BC or even Ontario, like houses prices have been inflated over to the millions, right? So let me know what your thoughts are on this issue. But in my opinion, like the issue is probably more like municipal versus federal. I think the issue here is that the federal government keeps bringing in immigration or people into the country, but then it's the provinces or even the municipality that is supposed to issue permits or build more homes, right? But they just can't keep up with the amount of people that are coming in. Now, within, I think in March or about in April, there's an article that stated that there were about 300 or 400 people, 400,000 people that came into Canada within those months alone. Now, where do we house them? And yes, that's probably the main issue, is that we're bringing all these people, but the houses are not there to support them, right? So let me know what your thoughts are about this. But in my opinion, like we should be able to build faster, but the problem is that the province or even the municipal cities, they're not able to issue permits fast enough to get them built. And the other thing is we have a labor shortage. A lot of the blue collar jobs, people, I mean, not just the jobs alone, but also the weather itself as well, right? So we can only build within the 6 months period, right? Because we don't have summers longer than that. And that's one of the other issues. Like we only have a little window of time to build things. And then the other flip side is that it takes a lot of time for cities to generate permits for builders. So the planning and the permit phase usually takes like over 2 years, or even like up to more than a year, I'd say. So now, because of the influx of people and the permit issues, we have delays in building houses, and that is why it's very hard for us to accommodate so many people coming into the country. And there are many changes the federal government's coming up, but I believe that the changes are not coming in fast enough, and that is why we as Canadians are suffering because of that. So eventually, I don't know, maybe it might get better overall. But I mean, let me know what your comments are in terms of this issue, and as always, please do subscribe. I like this video for more. Thank you.